have any questions for Diane? Oh, we do have one.
Does the Tea Party ever work in reverse, rather than just handing out material and teaching and all that? But do they collect information? Like, for instance, on Obamacare. I think that the Patriots have tons of ideas, but it's hard to find a place to focus it, and like the senators get 1 million letters and that sort of thing. But I wonder if it is ever used to get information up. That's all.
Well, we, along with many other groups, fought Obamacare right from the very beginning. And we knew what a disaster it was going to be. And it surely is. But if you go onto the website, teapartypatriots.org, and I'm almost positive we still have a toolkit up there on Obamacare. If not, I'll get you information. We do have the information, and now that it's brought to light again, I'm sure we're going to start working on it to get rid of it. And I do have some bumper stickers too, repeal Obamacare.
Do you have email? Oh, okay. Let's see, give us your name and phone number back to the back page, and we'll get information. Anybody else? Looks like you did a super job.
I hope so. Yeah, again, thank God. Thank you so much.
Is BethAnne here? Oh, I didn't see you come in. Anyway, next up we have a lady who I met many years ago from Americans for Prosperity. And boy, I'm looking forward to what she has to say, because she's going to share her feelings on where the country's heading and talk about the election results. BethAnne Mumford.
Thanks. When Ellen first asked me to come here, it was the middle of October, and I anticipated we'd be having a very different discussion about the election results. He said, "Oh, you're very brave to agree to come this early," since we didn't know how it worked out. But obviously, we're in a much better position than we thought we might be, just based on what the pundits and the pollsters were saying. Luckily, it turned out that they were wrong. And here we are today with the Republicans in control of the White House, Congress, and a real opportunity to make reforms and to move good policy forward. You guys got involved around a lot of these issues very early on. I think for the last decade, it has felt like we've been playing defense. But I was in Washington, D.C. yesterday, and today I actually just drove here from Washington, meeting with our delegation. There really is a positive feeling that we're finally going to have a chance to get stuff done. Obamacare, one of them, lots of talk about how to get that repealed, something that they want to do early. They're looking at what that might look like, how to move that forward. We were in Washington, D.C. talking to them about spending. You may know, just a month ago, Congress passed a temporary spending bill that expires in December. And Congress figured they would come back in after the election and agree to some compromise spending for the next year. But because of the results of the election, now Congress is looking at a clean spending bill, moving it forward for a very temporary period of time, maybe into March, so that the president-elect could have a lot more influence in what the budget is going to look like going forward. So again, real opportunity that people did not think was going to exist just a month ago. And visiting with the delegation today, you just really feel the wheels spinning, people thinking about taking a crack at bringing back the size and scope of government that we've seen grow, especially over the last 2 terms of President Obama. So that I think from a federal perspective, a lot of good news. The election brings us the same kind of results here in Pennsylvania. You guys are probably aware. The Senate majority picked up 3 seats. They have a veto-proof majority in the Senate here in Pennsylvania. The House picked up 4 seats, so now the breakdown is 122 to 81. All 7 of those new members, you mentioned Colonel Ryan, all 7 of those new members are economic freedom fighters. They are not lawmakers that are going to get in the way of some of the reforms and progress that your group would want to make. So that's good news for everybody, I think, to have folks that you can work with in Harrisburg who are going to be willing to, who are reform-minded, who are going to be willing to make the kind of reforms, the kind of decisions, again, that will rein back the size and scope of government in Harrisburg, which is overly burdensome to everybody in a number of different ways. When you're looking at the work in Harrisburg, 2 things because of the election that are probably going to be primary issues. One is that the governor's agenda is going to be a lot harder for him to push through. So he's weakened. As you recall, he came in his first year, he wanted $4.5 billion in new taxes. The legislature spent about 9 months fighting with him, and ultimately was able to get a budget without new taxes. But last year, our budget grew by 5%. Lawmakers passed a budget that they passed a new spending budget that was 5% larger before they even knew how they were going to pay for it. So after they got the spending in place, they tinkered around with different ways to fund that budget. Everybody knew that it was not going to be a budget that was going to balance long term. They had planned to come in the fall, do a couple pieces of legislation that they thought would help them with the numbers. They ultimately didn't even do those pieces of legislation. So it looks like we're going to go into the next session with a pretty significant deficit and still needing to fund that 5% expansion that they voted for, which means there's probably going to be a tax fight at some point, or at least that's what people are anticipating. Because again, we'll have another deficit. We've got more spending on the books, and it just simply has not been funded. So when we talk to legislators in Harrisburg, we talk a lot about ways to take spending out of the budget, because you know this, every year they spend more, but they never look at the programs that are in place to determine whether or not they're actually achieving what they were set up to achieve, whether or not the dollars are being spent wisely, or whether or not the dollars need to be spent at all. So we talked to them a lot about things like corporate welfare, about reforms within the system that would mean we just simply don't have to spend as much. That's not a conversation that many of them are comfortable with. So it is, to repeat the theme that we've already talked about tonight, it's incumbent on your group, folks like you out in the communities, to have these conversations with your lawmakers so that they know when they're looking at that budget, you're going to be paying attention. So while we may see the election as a net positive, the real work starts now. Because the people who have been elected, I think we all anticipate that they're going to do good things. But the system has not particularly changed much. And sometimes the system gets in the way of those good things happening. So we've got to be able to hold lawmakers accountable. We've got to be able to call them and tell them when they're going down the wrong path. To call them before they even start those conversations, to tell them what you expect and that you'll be paying attention and focused on what they're doing. It's incredibly difficult to educate in a crisis, and usually when we get to the budget The last, week of the budget negotiations, it feels like a crisis in Harrisburg. So take some time before we get there in June and really reach out to and talk to, not just your lawmakers, but your neighbors as well. Make sure that people understand what Harrisburg is talking about, and that people are engaged in it, because it is very easy for lawmakers to make decisions that are not the ones that you would like to see. So while the election results are great, the work really is on us to make sure that those results mean something long-term. You folks who have been involved in this process for years, Diane, it's very demoralizing to spend as much time and work on getting people elected, only to discover at the end of the day, they're not going to do what they said they were going to do. We have a real opportunity for good things, but we need to make sure that your group is engaged. I will echo what Elton said. It doesn't take much to volunteer. If you've got talents or skills or some way that you can help this group with that engagement, with holding lawmakers accountable, take the time to do that. Because it is a system that needs citizens to be engaged. We would not be in a position where we're talking about repealing Obamacare if when folks like the Tea Party and others got started, Obamacare passed, everybody just went home and said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Where we are today is because citizens, day after day, year after year, have continued to beat the drum that the law is not working. And we do not want the law in place. And it has to be like that for every issue that you're interested in, and every issue that will move the country forward, the country and the state forward. So again, just really that grassroots engagement is the most important thing you can do, and it doesn't have to be a lot. 30 minutes a day, just if you're on Facebook talking to your grandchildren, go to the pages of your lawmakers and leave a quick note. Make sure you've got Eldon and the group here. There are other groups across the state that can keep you updated on issues as they come up in Harrisburg and Washington, D.C. So just make sure you're tuned in on that and have a way to engage that works for you, but that can be effective. There's some social science that says for lawmakers, especially at the state level, once they get about 17 contacts from their district, they start to pay attention. This is an issue that people care about. So that tells you how little people get engaged in these issues, that if 17 emails or 17 phone calls get them kind of riled up, how effective you would be if everybody in this room made a phone call around an issue as it came up. So really keep that in mind. I will say from Americans for Prosperity standpoint, we're a grassroots organization. I'm the state director for our chapter here in Pennsylvania. There are 35 chapters around the country. We try to make sure that citizens are educated and tuned in on the issues that we work on. It's a narrow toolbox of economic freedom issues. So I know people are interested in sometimes issues outside of the work that we're doing. But we have started to create and share a scorecard. We just had a ceremony in the Rotunda on Tuesday acknowledging lawmakers who got an A or a B on our scorecard here in Pennsylvania. We have a legislature, 253 people, but there are only 30 people with A's and B's in both the House and the Senate. So you guys here, you've got Jerry Knowles and Mark Gillen and Ryan McKenzie were three legislators who ended up with a torchbearer gold ranking on that scorecard. But you can find that scorecard online at pataxpayersscorecard.org. You can look at that, and it lists all the bills that we happen to track, things that we key voted, some procedural things as well, because often lawmakers will make votes in committee, but they'll make a different vote when the bill comes up for final passage so that they can tell their constituents they voted against it, even though they voted for it as it moved along through the process. So we've tried to get at some of those quirks that happen so that you know, if you're really opposed to a bill, you shouldn't even let it come out of committee, knowing that once it comes out of committee, they're gonna put it on the floor and pass it, whether you vote for it or not. So some of that stuff we've tried to get at. We'll continue to refine that process. We'll have a different set of issues, obviously, coming up in the budget. But again, it's just another tool that you can use to be informed on what your legislators are doing and how they're voting in Harrisburg. We also have a scorecard for our congressional delegation on our website. That's www.afppennsylvania.org. You can find that as well. So that's it, I think, from my standpoint. Actually, just real quick, two things I just noticed I had written down. I wanted to talk a little bit about Diana. Last spring, for the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference, Diana's group and our group and a couple other groups got together and hosted a millennial mixer with the idea of bringing young people into the movement, getting them engaged, getting them involved. We had about 200 people show up for that, and those would be college age folks. So there's an effort certainly on the part of the Tea Party to continue to bring new people into that conversation, into the mix. I thought that was very, very exciting. I thought it was a great idea. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Thank you. We also would like to get more young people involved. So if you can give us any suggestion between the two of us, would be
What we did, what Tea Party Patriots did last year and the year before is we sponsored a few young people to go to the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. And that helps. And like I said, they had the young party, which I was too young to go. You had to be 35 and older, so they wouldn't let me in. But I'm sure BethAnne was there, and they said it was great.
Yeah, I was there, but only because I was a speaker. I also was too young to be there. And we did turn away a couple lawmakers at the door trying to stick to the age. But yeah, there were a couple hundred kids there, young folks, very excited, very engaged. I will tell you, there are a lot of young Republican groups and groups on college campuses. They're always looking for speakers. So it's probably worth just reaching out and seeing if you can go there, talk to them about what you do. You know, there are a lot of young people very engaged. We did an effort around the Senate race. We had college kids doing phone calls for us. They were very excited, more than happy to get on phones and talk to voters. They knew that this election was important to their future. So they're out there, but they're young. They don't know how to be engaged and how to be involved necessarily. So even just having mentoring programs or, you know, getting in front of them where they are, which is what millennials like much more than you bringing them here.
But they are involved in campus. So the reason I think that, and maybe BethAnne will agree with this, that you don't see them in the winter is because they're in school. And they are involved in school. Like Joe Gale, actually, the one that got county commissioner, 26 years old, came up through the Young Republicans. And a lot of them come up through the Young Republicans, and then they work for senators and they get jobs in DC. But they're there and they are busy doing things. They are active.
Thank you. Just for the information of the members, the board has been trying to contact groups in the local colleges of Ernie, Albright, Kutztown, and wherever. There is a club at Penn State Berks that is sort of active. They're doing a little something, but we have had no success, especially with the hierarchy in the colleges. I've sent letters, emails, and got essentially zero response. So I appreciate the input from the two of you. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for BethAnne? Way in the back.
Anybody up front?